Listen, I'm not here to make you feel good. I'm not here to tell you that everything is going to be fine. I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth right now is ugly, it's brutal, and most people aren't talking about it. Here's what I've learned after 40 years of building wealth, losing wealth, and rebuilding it again. The most dangerous financial threats are never the ones that hit you fast. They're never the dramatic crashes, the stock market collapses, the banking crises that make the front page of every newspaper. Those are the threats you can see coming. Those are the threats that wake you up, that force you to act. No, the most dangerous financial threat is the one that moves slowly, quietly, month by month, year by year. Draining your accounts while you sleep, while you eat dinner with your family, while you congratulate yourself on being a responsible homeowner who did everything right. I'm talking about property taxes. And right now, in 5 specific states across this country, property taxes have become something far more sinister than a line item on your annual bill. They have become the single greatest threat to retirement security for tens of millions of Americans. They are a slow-motion financial disaster that is already destroying the retirements of people who spent their entire working lives doing everything they were supposed to do. I'm going to tell you which 5 states are the worst offenders. I'm going to show you the numbers. I'm going to explain exactly how this machine works, why it keeps getting worse, and what you need to do to protect yourself. But before I do any of that, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to tell you, your financial advisor isn't going to say, your real estate agent isn't going to say, the politicians in your state capital definitely aren't going to say. This channel exists to tell you what nobody else will. So subscribe, become a member, join the people who actually want to understand what's happening to their money. Now let's get into it. Here's the story you were told. Work hard, save diligently, buy a house, pay down your mortgage. By the time you retire, you'll own your home free and clear. No more rent, no more mortgage payments. Your housing costs will be minimal. You'll be able to live comfortably on your Social Security and your retirement savings. It was a beautiful story. For a lot of people, it worked for a long time. But here's what nobody told you. Here's the part that got left out of every conversation your parents had about financial security, every article you read about retirement planning, every seminar you sat through about building wealth. Owning your home free and clear does not mean your housing costs disappear. It means your mortgage disappears. But property taxes never go away. They don't decrease when you retire. They don't freeze when you go on a fixed income. They don't care that you're 72 years old and your income dropped by 60% when you stopped working. Property taxes only go in one direction, up. And in 5 states, they have gone up so aggressively, so relentlessly, so without any apparent ceiling or limit, that they are now consuming a terrifying portion of retirement income. I have spoken with retirees who are paying more in annual property taxes than they paid for their first house. I have looked at the data on counties where the effective property tax rate exceeds 4% of assessed home value per year. I have seen the numbers that show what happens to a fixed income household when property tax bills become structurally unpredictable. It destroys them, not quickly, slowly, painfully, year after year, dollar after dollar, until there is nothing left. Before I name the 5 states, you need to understand the mechanism, because once you understand how property taxes actually work, you'll never look at your tax bill the same way again. Property taxes are calculated based on 2 numbers. First, the assessed value of your property. Second, the tax rate, also called the mill rate, set by your local government. You multiply those 2 numbers together, and that's your bill. Now here's the first trap. In most states, assessed values are not fixed. They are reevaluated regularly, sometimes every year. When the real estate market goes up, And over the past decade, it has gone up dramatically in almost every major market in the country. Your assessed value goes up with it, even if you have no intention of selling, even if your income has not changed at all, even if you're retired and living on a fixed pension and Social Security. The government looks at what your house might sell for in the current market, and then they send you a bill based on that number, not based on what you paid for it, not based on what you can afford, based on what it's worth on the open market right now, a market you have no intention of participating in. This is the first trap. Rising home values create rising tax bills for people who aren't selling anything. Here's the second trap. Tax rates are set by local governments, municipalities, counties, school districts. These entities have their own budgetary needs, their own pension obligations, their own infrastructure costs, and when their costs go up, which they always do, they raise the tax rate. Even if assessed values are already rising, even if the overall tax burden on homeowners is already enormous. In some jurisdictions, both the assessed value and the tax rate are rising simultaneously. That creates a compounding effect that is devastating for people on fixed incomes. Your assessed value goes up 10%, your tax rate goes up 5%, your bill doesn't go up 10 or 15%, it goes up more because you're multiplying two growing numbers against each other. This is not an accident. This is how local governments balance their budgets on the backs of homeowners. And retirees who are stuck in place, who have deep roots, who have no easy ability to simply pick up and move, are the most vulnerable targets. There's a third trap, and this one is the most insidious. Property taxes are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. They are not negotiable in the way credit card debt is negotiable. If you fall behind on your property taxes, the government can place a lien on your home. If you fall far enough behind, they can seize it. They can take the house that you spent 30 years paying for, the house where you raised your children, the house you plan to leave to your family. This is not theoretical. This is happening to real people right now, and it's happening most aggressively in 5 specific states. I want to stop here and address something directly because I know who watches this channel. A lot of you are over 55. A lot of you are approaching retirement or already in it, and you may be thinking, I've heard about property taxes before. I know they're high. I've been paying them for years. What's different now? Here's what's different. For the first 20 or 30 years of your working life, rising property taxes were an annoyance. They were real money, but they were a manageable percentage of your income. You were earning. You were building equity. The overall financial picture was positive, even if the tax bill was irritating. Retirement changes that equation completely. Here's why. First, your income drops. Most people experience a significant income reduction when they retire. Social Security replaces roughly 40% of pre-retirement income for the average earner. If you have pension income or retirement account distributions, that helps. But rarely does a retired household maintain the same income level it had during peak earning years, the income side of your budget contracts. Second, your expenses don't drop proportionally. Inflation is real. Healthcare costs are rising faster than general inflation. The things you need most as you age, medical care, prescription drugs, insurance, are getting more expensive every year, not less. The expense side of your budget either stays flat or grows. Third, your flexibility is limited. You can't easily go back to work to cover a shortfall. You can't simply take on a second job when your property tax bill jumps by $3,000. Your income is largely fixed. Your options for increasing it are limited. You are, in financial terms, on the defensive. You can't easily go on offense. Put these 3 things together, and you have a population of people who are income constrained, expense pressured, and flexibility limited. and then add an aggressive, relentless property tax system on top of that. You've built a machine for destroying retirement security, and in 5 states, that machine is running at full speed. I am going to start here because New Jersey deserves to be called out first, loudest, and with no ambiguity whatsoever. New Jersey has the highest effective property tax rate in the entire United States, not second highest, not among the highest. The highest, year after year by a significant margin. The average effective property tax rate in New Jersey is over 2% of assessed home value annually. In many counties, it's closer to 2.5% or 3%. In the highest burden areas, effective rates can approach 4%. Let me translate those percentages into real dollars so you understand what we're actually talking about. If you own a home in New Jersey assessed at $400,000, and in many parts of the state that is not a luxury home, that is a modest middle-class home, you are paying somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000 per year in property taxes. Every single year, whether you're working or retired, whether your income is $50,000 or $5,000. If your home is assessed at $700,000, which in suburban New Jersey near New York City is entirely achievable for a relatively ordinary house, you could be paying $15,000 to $20,000 per year in property taxes. Just in property taxes. That is more than many Americans earn in wages. Here's what makes New Jersey particularly brutal for retirees. The state's property tax relief programs, the mechanisms that are supposed to help older residents on fixed incomes manage these enormous bills, are inadequate, underfunded, and means-tested in ways that exclude a significant portion of the people who actually need help. The ANCOR program, which replaced the Homestead Benefit Program, provides some relief, but the relief amounts are modest relative to the scale of the tax burden. We're talking about a system where a retiree might pay $18,000 in annual property taxes and receive a relief benefit of $1,500. The math doesn't work. And here's what's happening to New Jersey's long-term trajectory. Young people are leaving. Working-age families are leaving. The population is not growing. The tax base is not expanding. But the obligations of the state and its municipalities, pension obligations, infrastructure costs, debt service, keep growing. The only way to pay for those growing obligations with a shrinking or stagnant tax base is to raise rates. This is the death spiral. More taxes drive more people out. Fewer people means less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means higher rates to compensate. Higher rates drive more people out. And the people who are least able to leave, the retired, the elderly, those with deep community roots and no practical ability to relocate, end up subsidizing the exit of everyone else. If you own a home in New Jersey and you're approaching retirement, you need to do the math honestly. Calculate what you will owe in property taxes over a 20-year retirement, not what you owe today. What you will owe if rates continue rising at their historical pace. The number will shock you. Illinois is a case study in what happens when a state government spends decades making catastrophically bad decisions and then passes the bill to its homeowners. The property tax burden in Illinois is among the highest in the country, with an average effective rate that ranks it consistently in the top 3 or 4 nationally. But the averages in Illinois are misleading because the variation between counties is enormous. In the Chicago metropolitan area, Cook County and the surrounding collar counties, property tax rates are brutal. In some Cook County suburbs, the effective property tax rate on residential properties exceeds 3 and even 4% of assessed value. We are talking about communities where a home assessed at $300,000 generates an annual tax bill of $9,000, $10,000, $12,000. But here's what makes Illinois uniquely dangerous for retirees. The state has a massive unfunded pension crisis. The Illinois pension systems are among the most underfunded in the country. The gap between what the state has promised to pay retired government workers and what it actually has the money to pay runs into the hundreds of billions of dollars. That gap has to be filled somehow. And in Illinois, it is being filled increasingly through property taxes at the local level. School districts, municipalities, and counties raise property tax rates to cover costs that the state isn't fully funding. The result is that Illinois property taxes don't just reflect the cost of local services. They reflect the accumulated consequences of decades of state-level fiscal mismanagement. This is important to understand. If Illinois were simply expensive, that would be one thing. But Illinois is expensive and getting more expensive specifically because of structural problems that show no sign of being resolved. The pension obligations grow every year. The political will to address them through means other than tax increases has never materialized. And homeowners, including retirees who chose to stay in the state where they built their lives, are the ones bearing the weight. The migration data confirms the story. Illinois has experienced consistent net negative domestic migration for years. People are leaving. And importantly, the people most able to leave, working-age professionals, business owners, higher earners, are the ones going. The people staying are disproportionately older, more established, with stronger roots. The people who will be least able to absorb future tax increases are the ones being left behind to absorb them. For a retiree in Illinois, this trajectory is not a maybe. It is a near certainty. Property taxes will continue to rise. The pension obligations that are driving them upward are legally protected. The political environment shows no credible path to structural reform. If your retirement plan depends on your home being an affordable place to live for the next 20 years, Illinois is a profoundly risky bet. Connecticut is a state that was built on wealth. Insurance companies, financial services firms, hedge funds, high-earning New York commuters who chose Connecticut's towns and cities for their quality of life. For decades, that concentration of high-income residents allowed Connecticut to fund a generous public sector without catastrophically high tax rates. That era is over. Connecticut has experienced significant outmigration of its highest-earning residents over the past decade. The hedge fund community has largely relocated to Florida. Remote work has allowed high earners to live wherever they want, and many of them have chosen to live somewhere without Connecticut's income tax and property tax burden. The wealthy individuals who used to subsidize the state's spending have been voting with their feet and their moving trucks. What's left is a state with some of the highest property taxes in the country, significant income taxes, enormous unfunded pension and post-retirement healthcare liabilities, and a shrinking high-income tax base to pay for all of it. In Fairfield County, the Gold Coast of Connecticut that includes towns like Greenwich, Westport, and Darien, home values are high enough that even moderate tax rates generate large absolute dollar bills. But effective rates aren't moderate. In many Fairfield County municipalities, effective property tax rates range from 1.5% to well over 2%. On a $1 million home, that's $15,000 to $20,000 per year. And here's the specific threat to Connecticut retirees. Connecticut is one of the few states that taxes Social Security income. Most states exempt Social Security from taxation. Connecticut taxes it. So Connecticut retirees face a double burden: high property taxes and state income tax on their Social Security checks. The combined effective burden on retirement income in Connecticut is among the highest in the country. The long-term fundamentals in Connecticut are not improving. The population has been essentially flat for years. The young people leave after college because the job market outside of a few sectors is weak. The wealthy leave because they can. And the property tax burden is falling increasingly on middle-class homeowners and retirees who built their lives there and can't easily leave. If you own a home in Connecticut and you're planning to retire there, you need to model your property tax trajectory honestly. Don't assume the rates will stay where they are. Look at what they've done over the past 10 years. Look at what the state's pension obligations will require over the next 10. Then decide whether your retirement budget can handle what's coming. New York is complicated because the state is enormous and the property tax burden varies dramatically by location. New York City, paradoxically, has relatively moderate property tax effective rates because of the way properties are assessed and the structure of the city's revenue system. But outside of New York City, the story is very different. In Westchester County, one of the most affluent counties in the country, immediately north of the city, property taxes are extraordinarily high. Effective rates commonly run between 2 and 3%. On a home assessed at $800,000, which in Westchester is not unusual for a 4-bedroom house, the annual property tax bill can easily exceed $15,000 to $20,000. But Westchester is not the extreme case. In parts of upstate New York, in communities far from the economic engines of the city, property taxes are equally high by rate, even though home values are dramatically lower. The result is that modest homes in economically struggling upstate communities generate tax bills that represent a devastating percentage of household income. This is the core of the New York property tax problem for retirees. The system was built to fund public schools, and school funding in New York is heavily reliant on local property taxes. Communities with declining populations, aging infrastructure, and shrinking economic bases still have schools that need to be funded. The per-pupil cost of education doesn't decrease when enrollment drops. It often increases, and that cost is borne by an increasingly older, increasingly fixed-income homeowner base. In New York, a retiree who owns a home in many suburban or rural areas is essentially paying for a school system at a cost level that made sense when they had a working income and when the community was growing. Now the community is shrinking, their income has declined, but the tax bill hasn't shrunk with it. If anything, it's grown. The state has various exemption programs for seniors and veterans. STAR, the school tax relief program, provides some relief. Enhanced STAR provides additional relief for income-qualified seniors. But as with New Jersey's programs, the relief is inadequate relative to the total burden in the highest tax areas. It takes the edge off, but doesn't address the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is structural and political. New York school funding model is deeply embedded. The real estate interests, the teacher unions, the local government structures all have strong incentives to maintain the current system. Real reform that would meaningfully reduce the property tax burden on retirees would require dismantling arrangements that are politically very well protected. It hasn't happened, and there is no credible sign that it will happen in the near future. New Hampshire might surprise you on this list. New Hampshire is often cited as a tax-friendly state because it has no state income tax and no state sales tax. The live, free, or die state, a place where people go specifically to escape the tax burdens of neighboring Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine. But here's the other side of that equation that nobody mentions when they're selling you on New Hampshire's tax advantages. New Hampshire funds a significant portion of its public services, particularly public education, through property taxes. Without the revenue from income or sales taxes, the property tax has to do more work. And it does. New Hampshire has one of the highest effective property tax rates in the entire country, consistently ranking in the top 5 nationally. The average effective property tax rate in New Hampshire exceeds 2% of assessed home value. In many communities, the rate is higher. In a state where home values have risen sharply over the past several years, driven partly by people fleeing Massachusetts and other high-cost states, that 2+% rate is applied to increasingly large assessed values. Here's the specific danger for retirees who move to New Hampshire thinking they're escaping high taxes. They escape income tax, they escape sales tax, but they don't escape property taxes. And if they're coming from a state like Massachusetts, where effective property tax rates are lower, they may find that their property tax burden actually increases when they move to New Hampshire for the supposed tax savings. The arithmetic can be brutal. A retiree moving from Massachusetts to New Hampshire might save several $1,000s per year in state income tax. But if their property taxes increase by an equivalent or greater amount, the net benefit evaporates. They've traded one tax for another without fully understanding the trade. This is not an argument against New Hampshire. There are good reasons to live there and real advantages to the tax structure for some people. But for retirees on fixed incomes with significant home equity, the property tax burden deserves serious, careful analysis before any decision is made. The absence of income and sales taxes does not mean the absence of significant tax burden. It means the burden has been shifted almost entirely onto property. Let me step back from the state-by-state analysis and describe the bigger picture, because what I've shown you so far is only part of the story. The property tax crisis for retirees is going to get significantly worse over the next decade, and here's why. First, the pension crisis. Every state I've discussed, and many others, has significant unfunded pension obligations. These obligations are legally binding. They cannot be reduced without court challenges, political battles, and constitutional confrontations that rarely succeed. The money has to come from somewhere. And as state governments find it politically impossible to cut benefits or reform systems, they increasingly push the cost onto local governments, which then raise property taxes to compensate. Second, the infrastructure deficit. America's physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, water systems, sewage systems, public buildings, is aging and in many places deteriorating. The cost of maintaining and replacing that infrastructure is enormous and growing. Local governments are the front line of infrastructure spending, and local governments fund themselves through property taxes. Third, the healthcare cost spiral. Public sector employees, including retired government workers, receive healthcare benefits that are becoming dramatically more expensive over time. Those costs are borne by the same local governments and school districts that are already stretched by pension obligations and infrastructure needs. The pressure on property tax rates is relentless. Fourth, demographic change. As the baby boom generation moves fully into retirement, the proportion of homeowners who are on fixed incomes is growing. At the same time, the working age population that would normally provide a growing tax base through economic activity is proportionally smaller in many of the states I've mentioned. The ratio of property tax burden to retirement income is worsening simultaneously from both directions. This is not a problem that fixes itself. These are structural forces. They require structural solutions, and in the states I've named, there is no credible political coalition that is capable of implementing the structural solutions necessary to reverse the trajectory. Before I tell you what to do, I want to spend a moment on something that doesn't get discussed enough when we talk about policy and taxes and economic trends: the human cost. Because behind every percentage point of property tax increase, behind every county assessor's notice of revised valuation, there are real people making real decisions in real time. And those decisions, when forced by financial pressure rather than made freely, are painful. I want you to understand what actually happens when property taxes become unmanageable on a fixed income. The first stage is denial. The bill arrives, it's higher than last year, it's been higher than the year before that for several years in a row. The homeowner looks at it, feels a knot in their stomach, and then tells themselves it's manageable. They'll cut back somewhere. They'll dip a little deeper into savings. They'll figure it out. This is human nature. We are wired to preserve the status quo, to avoid the painful work of confronting a problem until it is absolutely impossible to ignore. The second stage is adjustment. The homeowner starts making changes. They eat out less. They cancel subscriptions. They delay medical appointments they should be keeping. They put off home repairs. The roof needs attention, but that money is going to the tax bill. The furnace is aging, but this isn't the year to replace it. These are not dramatic, catastrophic decisions. They're small, seemingly reasonable compromises, but they accumulate. And the ones that involve deferred maintenance are particularly dangerous because they transform what should be modest ongoing costs into large future crises. The third stage is the real problem. At some point, the adjustments aren't enough. Savings are depleted faster than projected. The fixed income, the Social Security, the pension, the modest retirement account distributions doesn't cover the tax bill plus ordinary living expenses. The homeowner starts facing a genuine crisis. This is the stage where I've seen people make desperate decisions. They take on reverse mortgages they don't fully understand to cover current expenses, mortgaging their future for immediate cash flow relief. They borrow from adult children, creating family financial stress that damages relationships. They attempt to rent out portions of their home, which creates its own complications and stress. Some of them sell under pressure without adequate time to make a good decision about where to go next. And some of them simply fall behind on taxes, which triggers a legal process that can ultimately result in losing the home entirely. I am not describing edge cases. I am describing patterns that play out across these 5 states thousands of times per year. The financial advisors who work with pre-retirees see it. The elder law attorneys see it. The nonprofit housing counselors see it. The only people who don't seem to see it, or who choose not to talk about it publicly, are the politicians who set the policies and the real estate industry professionals who have incentives to tell you that everything will be fine. I refuse to be one of the people who doesn't say it. This is real. It is preventable, but only if you act before the crisis arrives, not after. Let me tell you what I observe among the people who are genuinely wealthy, who have built real, lasting financial security, and who are now managing that security through retirement because their behavior in the face of these property tax dynamics is instructive. They are not sitting still. The concentration of wealthy retirees in Florida is not an accident. It is not primarily about the weather, though that's a convenient story. It is about the numbers. Florida has no state income tax. Florida's property tax effective rates, while not trivially low, are significantly lower than the 5 states I've named. Florida has homestead exemptions and assessment caps that specifically protect long-term homeowners from the worst effects of rising home values on their tax bills. The combination of these factors is why Southeast Florida, the Tampa Bay area, and other parts of the state have seen enormous inflows of wealthy retirees over the past decade. The same calculation is driving migration to Tennessee. Nashville has emerged as one of the most popular destinations for higher income retirees and pre-retirees from the Northeast and Midwest. Tennessee has no state income tax. Property taxes are moderate by national standards. The quality of life is high. The cost of living, while rising, is still significantly lower than in the high-tax states. Texas, for all its problems and complexity, continues to attract retirees from Illinois and other high-burden states. The trade-off in Texas is interesting. Property taxes are not low by national standards, but the absence of a state income tax means the overall tax burden for most retired households is still significantly lower than in Illinois or New York. What these patterns tell me is that the people with the resources and the willingness to look honestly at the numbers are making the same calculation. They are looking at the trajectory of property taxes in states like New Jersey and Illinois. They are looking at the trajectory of their own retirement income, and they are deciding clearly and deliberately that those two trajectories are incompatible with financial security. You don't have to be wealthy to make this calculation. You just have to be willing to look at the numbers honestly and act on what they tell you. I want to address something directly because I know it's on your mind, the question of when. If you're 62 and planning to retire at 65, is now the right time to be thinking about this? Yes, absolutely yes. In fact, this is precisely the right time, because a decision made at 62 with 3 years to execute thoughtfully is dramatically better than a decision forced at 72 by financial pressure. The people who end up in the worst situations are not the ones who looked at the problem too early. They're the ones who looked at it too late, or worse, the ones who looked at it and decided not to look too carefully because the implications were uncomfortable. If you're already retired and you're in your late 60s or early 70s, you may feel like this conversation doesn't apply to you. You may feel like it's too late to make major changes. I want to push back on that, gently but firmly. If you have 20 years of retirement ahead of you, 20 years of compounding property tax increases, 20 years of depletion of savings that you might have preserved by relocating, that is not a small thing. That is potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is the difference between leaving something to your family and leaving them nothing. That is real. The question isn't whether it's too late to act. The question is whether the financial benefit of acting outweighs the cost and disruption. And in many cases, for people well into retirement, it still does. The numbers need to be run specifically for your situation. But do not assume that age makes this analysis irrelevant. It does not. I'm not in the business of delivering bad news without actionable guidance. So let me be direct about what your options actually are. Option 1, and the most powerful one, is relocation. I know that word makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I know you have community ties, family connections, history in the place where you live. I'm not dismissing any of that. But I am asking you to be honest about the financial arithmetic. Take your current annual property tax bill. Now apply the historical rate of annual increase for your county over the past 10 years. Project that forward 20 years. That's an approximation of what you'll pay over a retirement. Add up those numbers. Then ask yourself whether your retirement savings, your Social Security, your pension, whatever income you have, can sustain that trajectory without fundamentally compromising your financial security. If the answer is no, or even if the answer is I'm not sure, you need to investigate what relocation would actually cost and actually save. States like Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Nevada, and South Carolina have dramatically lower property tax burdens. They also have no state income tax or low state income tax. For a retiree, the combined difference between living in New Jersey and living in Florida can be tens of thousands of dollars per year. Over a 20-year retirement, that's real money. That's the difference between financial security and financial strain. Option 2 is to aggressively pursue every available exemption and relief program in your current state. Most states have senior exemption programs. Most have income-based relief programs. Many have circuit breaker programs that cap property taxes as a percentage of income for qualifying households. These programs are often underutilized because people don't know about them or don't apply for them. Go to your county assessor's office. Ask specifically about every exemption and relief program available to residents of your age and income level. Do not assume you're already receiving everything you're entitled to. Many people are not. Option 3 is to challenge your property assessment. Your property tax bill is based on an assessed value that is set by government assessors. Assessors make mistakes. They use comparable sales data that may not accurately reflect your specific property. They may not account for condition issues, location disadvantages, or other factors that would reduce your property's market value relative to the comparables they're using. Most jurisdictions have an appeals process. It is not difficult, it does not require an attorney, and it succeeds more often than people expect. If you believe your assessed value is too high, and in a rapidly rising market, overassessment is common, appeal it. The worst that happens is nothing changes. The best that happens is your tax bill drops significantly. Option 4, and this is the hardest one to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, is to honestly evaluate whether your current home is the right financial choice for your retirement. A large house in an expensive state may represent significant equity. That equity is largely illiquid. It is not generating income, and it is costing you property taxes every year. Sometimes the financially smartest decision is to sell, capture that equity, move somewhere with a lower cost of living and a lower property tax burden, and invest the difference. This is not a failure. This is a rational financial decision. Here is what I want you to take away from everything I've just told you. The promise of home ownership as the foundation of retirement security was built on a certain set of assumptions. One of those assumptions was that the ongoing cost of owning a home, specifically property taxes, would remain manageable relative to retirement income. In 5 states and increasingly in others, that assumption has been broken. Not slightly bent, broken. The property tax burden in these states has risen to a level where it fundamentally undermines the financial security of fixed-income homeowners. And the structural forces driving that burden upward show no sign of reversing. This is not a political statement. I don't care which party is in charge in these states. I care about the numbers. And the numbers in New Jersey, Illinois, Connecticut, New York, and New Hampshire are telling a story that every homeowner who is approaching or already in retirement needs to hear. Your house may be paid off. Your mortgage may be gone, but you are not free and clear. You will never be free and clear because property taxes are forever. They are a permanent obligation that rises with time, that demands payment regardless of your income, and that carries the ultimate penalty of property seizure if left unpaid. Understanding that is not pessimism, it's clarity. And clarity is the foundation of every good financial decision I have ever made. The people who come out ahead in retirement are not the ones who were the luckiest. They're the ones who were honest with themselves early enough to do something about what they saw. They looked at the trends, they did the math, they made hard decisions, and 5 or 10 years later they were grateful they did. I'm giving you the information you need to be one of those people. Now I need you to smash that like button. I need you to share this video with everyone you know who is approaching retirement, who owns a home in one of these states, who is making assumptions about their housing costs that haven't been stress tested against the actual data. This information could be worth tens of thousands of dollars to the people who receive it and act on it. And it could save them from one of the most painful financial outcomes imaginable, spending 30 years building a retirement and then watching it eroded year after year by a tax bill that never stops growing. Subscribe to this channel, become a member, because we are going to keep talking about the things that actually matter to your money, not the things that are comfortable to talk about, the things that are true. Go look at your property tax bill right now. Go look at what it was 5 years ago. Calculate the rate of increase. Project it forward. Be honest with yourself about what you see. Then decide what you're going to do about it, because doing nothing is also a decision. And in a rising property tax environment on a fixed retirement income, doing nothing is the most expensive choice of all. Your future self is watching what you do right now. Make the decision that person will thank you for.